I have a shorter title than you have in the folder for a shorter talk also. I don't talk about externalism, nor will talk about Kant. So I only talk about natural kinds and indexicals and about Robert Hanna's theory on those topics. I think I won't mention Kant at all. So I start presenting what Hanna's theory as I get it, and then there's some problems that I see in his version of, especially in his use of indexicals in the account of natural kind concepts. I think I'm mostly brief, so we can get a bit faster through those topics. So empirical concepts have two sets of features in Hanna's theory: intrinsic features that constitute its conceptual microstructure, and synthetic characteristics that are added to the conceptual core by means of a non-discursive or non-intellectual synthesis. And the natural kind concepts are empirical concepts that have an extra feature and essential indexical component. For instance, gold has two components: a referential component that is represented by this body, and attributive components or descriptive components that are represented by those features: yellow metal, heavy, rust resistant, etc. So this is the structure of a natural kind concept. The descriptive features of natural kind terms constrain what is picked out by its indexical feature. So here is Hanna again on the topic. Natural kinds are picked out essentially indexically, but not purely indexically. Instead, they are picked out essentially indexically under further constraint certain associated description. So my main claim is that Hanna cannot find a proper place for the indexical component of natural kind terms. So this is what I try to argue in different kinds of arguments. So my first point: what's indexical in Hanna's Kantian natural kind terms? I think this is the only corpus of Kant in my talk. I'm really talking about Hanna. The whole boarding of the reference fixing rests on the descriptive component of natural kind terms. Once the reference to a given word is fixed indexically. So here's again Hanna. The referential component of the concept gold, namely this body, is an essential indexical component shared by all natural kind concepts, which restricts them to the totality of matter found in any given possible word, considered as the actual word. But in any such word, the extension of gold is all those bodies that possess the analyzable or the combustible phenomenological identifying features of gold, namely yellow, metal, heavy, high density, malleable, ductile, rust resistant, and so on. So this accommodates the indexical reference term of a master term, a tricky problem for everyone. And the result is a term with satisfaction of semantics, in the sense of Kant-Bach. There are, to my mind, three clearly visible problems in Hanna's partially indexical approach. So the first one is that the essential indexicality in Hanna's theory is very much unlike their essential indexical. This is not a problem in itself, as we see, but it's a bit misleading to quote Perry in this context. The second problem is that the structure of the individuation of objects in perception exploited by demonstrative reference is not based on the descriptive content of specific kinds. And the third problem is that the demonstrative do not pick out the entire material word, even if the actual word is selected contextually. So I'll go through those three first problems in Hanna's theory, and the result will be that Hanna has a different agenda, which is a way to see what I take to be his theory. So first, this is not at all like Perry's essential indexical. In Perry's argument, the grasp of an indexical thought changed the course of actions of the agent. So here is Perry's famous adventure in a supermarket. So I once found a tray of sugar on the supermarket floor, pushing my car down the aisle on one side of the town counter and back the aisle on the other, seeking the shopper with the torn sack. Tell him he was making a mess. With each trip around the counter, the tray became thicker, but I seemed unable to catch up. Finally, down on me, I was the shopper I was trying to catch. I believed that at the outset that the shopper with the torn sack was making a mess, and I was right. But I did not believe that I was making a mess. That seems to be something I came to believe, and I came to believe that I stopped following the tray around the counter and rearranged the torn sack in my car. My changing beliefs seemed to explain my changing behavior. So this is the very well-known passage in the beginning of the essential indexical of John Perry. And the point is that when he acquired an indexical thought, he changes his behavior accordingly in a way that is not explained by his grasp of general thoughts. So there's no such a thing if the indexical component selects the entire actual material world. If you assume that every agent belongs to only one word, this indexical reference will never make any difference for her actions. There is no contrast of perspective of an agent on a scene that is represented by shifting words. It is, of course, it is misleading to call Perry in this context. Well, it's just another way, another kind of essential indexical. This is the first problem. It's not very serious, but well, we'll see that. But the second problem is a bit more, I think, problematic, so to say. So the use of a demonstrative typically selects an object in a speech situation. And this selection requires principles of individuation. However, what counts as an object is not determined by the microconceptual structure of a given kind, but is rather structured as a spelled object. So spelled object is the object found by the psychologist Elizabeth Spell as being grasped by toddlers very early on, and it has some certain characteristic features. So the constraints on spelled objects, cohesion, boundedness, and rigidity, appear early in the ontogeny or formounts. They are not specific to any kind, or they belong to the kind physical object. Demonstrative reference builds on this capacity, or at least this is part of the story. It can also make reference to an event with a demonstrative, and that requires another sort of individuation principles. The crucial point is that we are not forced to choose between a structured demonstrative reference unable to individuate an object in a scene and the precisification by descriptive content of an empirical concept. There are more basic principles that can be exploited in the use of a demonstrative. Again, both for Kaplan and for Lewis, the word is fixed by an indexical description. So this much is so. The second problem is that it doesn't seem right to me to say that since demonstrative is unable to select an object in a scene by itself, we need the concept of a kind to do this sort of job. We can do with much simpler principles. Well, but the word is part of the context. This much is right. So here's David Lewis. I suggest that actual and its cognate should be analyzed as indexical terms. Terms whose reference varies depending on relevant features of the context of utterance. The relevant feature of context for the term actual is the word at which a given utterance occurs. This is also true for Kaplan. The main interest of the indexical reference to the whole word is contrastive, and we do make contrastive reference to the words mainly, if not only, in argumentative strategies, in particular in skeptical scenarios. That's what David Lewis says of his own brand of indexicalism about words. The strongest evidence for the indexical analysis of actuality is that it explains why skepticism about our own actuality is absurd. So again, in Kaplan's framework, the word is a contextual parameter selected by the indexical actually, just as it is the case for Lewis. It's also a component of the circumstance of evaluation in sentences without modal operators in which the parameters of the circumstance of evaluation are taken from the context. The problem here lies not so much in the fact that the word is a contextual parameter as in the word used to select it. In Hanna's framework, the word is designated by the demonstrative this, or the complex demonstrative this body, and this is not at all the case in Kaplan and Lewis. For them, the word is selected by the word actual or actually. The use of a demonstrative typically selects parts of a scene of a conversation. It's not used to refer to a word. Linguists make a distinction between exophoric demonstratives that are used with reference to entities in a speech situation, and endophoric demonstratives covering all other uses: anaphoric use, discursive, deictic use, and cognition use. So here are a couple of quotations of a linguist. Exophoric demonstratives focus the hearer's attention on entities in the situation surrounding the interlocutors. They have three distinctive features. First, they involve the speaker as a deictic center. Second, they indicate a deictic contrast on a distant scale. And third, they are often accompanied by pointing gesture. And exophoric demonstratives have a priority. So first, why? Well, first, use is prior language acquisition. Second, exophoric demonstratives are morphologically and distributionally unmarked. And third, the grammaticalization of demonstratives originates from the unvariegated use for state and recognition of uses. That is, exophoric demonstratives are never immediately reanalyzed as grammatical markers. All three arguments suggest that exophoric use has a special status. If it is the prototypical use for which all other uses derive. So the intended work of demonstratives, referring to the whole word, as it is the case in Hanna's proposal, is entirely atypical if it exists at all. Although we may accept it as a piece of a philosophical convention, we see again departure, at least from one of Kaplan's motivation for his logic of demonstratives, the representation of the semantic apparatus of natural language. So here is Kaplan's consumerist semantics. Words come to us prepackaged with the semantic value. If you are to use those words, the words you have received, the words about the linguistic community, then you must refer to their meaning. So demonstratives do not have the meaning of picking up a word. We do not receive the word this as an indexical designating the entire actual material word. But again, we are forced to accept Kaplan's project of representing natural languages or a natural language. So far, I have only distinguished Hanna's claims concerning indexicals from other projects around similar topics. Unlike Perry, his essential indexical has nothing to do with the representation of perspective of the agent on the scene. There are individuation principles more basic than the conceptual structure of natural kinds that are exploited in demonstrative reference. And finally, typical uses of demonstrative select objects and events, not words. Well, the main result is that Hanna's project and Kaplan-Perry's framework are quite distinct. But this is, of course, okay. It's entirely legitimate to have different philosophical agendas. But, well, now I go to another wave of criticism linking Hanna's project to Putnam's approach to these matters. They claim that in natural kind terms have an indexical nature can be found, of course, in Hilary Putnam. The indexicality has a crucial role in Putnam's approach. That is, what fixes the reference across different situations in which speakers may have similar microconceptual structures for different kinds, as it is the case for water and twin water, of course. In other words, across situations in which microconceptual structures are unable to distinguish different kinds. Something of this sort seems to be needed in Hanna's framework. Why? Well, because different members of a community may have different core components of a natural kind concept. Say, some do not include rust resistance in the microconceptual structure of gold. In this case, something more is required to fix the reference to the same natural kind across distinct competencies. That is what allows the addition of new components to the conceptual core of a given concept. Now, we have two options here. Either every speaker has a sufficient grasp of descriptive components of every natural kind term in her vocabulary so that the expansion of the microconceptual structure of each term will be guaranteed to refer to the same kind by satisfaction of semantics, or the reference of the same kind across the speakers with different competencies will be assured indexically. So the first branch of the alternative is not very realistic. It seems that in many cases, the speakers do not grasp features of a concept that unambiguously pick out what is in its extension. That doesn't preclude expansion of the revision of the descriptive components of such concepts. But something is required to fix reference across changes of the conceptual structure. It is precisely the sort of argument used by Kripke and Putnam to promote the direct referential framework. So Hanna can respond to this challenge by assuming the second branch of the alternative, that is, the indexical way of fixing the reference of natural kind terms across situations. But you need another reading of the indexical component of natural kind concepts. The indexical component doesn't designate a word, but a sample of the stuff present in the speech situation. In Putnam's theory, a natural kind, say water, is whatever there's some equivalence relation, the relation called saying L, it's the same as relation, to the piece of liquid referred to as this in the actual word. There is an indexical component, but doesn't work alone. This designates a sample that is supposed to have a certain relation with other samples of the same material. The indexical semantics of natural kind terms is not easily defined. To begin with, there is not a standard sample of water or tiger, unlike matter. It's not a matter of stipulation. Moreover, it's not clear what is designated across distinct situations. I don't have a positive theory about that, nor do I think anyone has a good positive theory about that. It's a tricky matter. Indexical reference fixing for natural kinds requires a conceptual structure that will select what counts as the same. The sameness relation is not determined, of course, by the object selected in the speech situation. It is not clear, however, that what is required is the micro-conceptual structure. The perceived structure may change as the conceptual structure associated with a given kind changes. Something else is needed to fix the reference across descriptive changes. A part of the solution, as Scott says, is the fact that we presuppose that the selected objects are samples of a certain kind. And a feasible presupposition, of course. But at least once Putnam indicates another indexical component of such terms. Now then we have maintained that indexicality extends beyond the obviously indexical words and morphemes, for instance, the tense of verbs. Our theory can be summarized as saying that words like water have an unnoticed indexical component. Water is stuff that bears a certain similarity relation to water around here. So the indexical reference to the actual word is added to the indexical selection of a sample. This addition follows the contrast between words in Putnam's story, Earth and Twin Earth. This is probably what Lewis has in mind in his indexical interpretation of actual. It doesn't eliminate the proper demonstrative component of natural kind terms, select samples across speech situations related by a certain sameness relation. So following Putnam, I will unpack a bit differently a natural kind concept. So I will follow the structure of Hanna's proposal, but I will unpack a bit differently the first component. So the referential component has this sample plus the actual word, plus, of course, the attributive components, yellow, metal, heavy, etc. But does it explain why gold is necessarily a yellow metal? So it would be, however, a mistake to pretend that we can make our way back from Hanna to Putnam, essentially because their approaches lead to different model profiles of natural kind terms. It's not easy to spell out precisely the semantics of natural kind terms in the direct reference framework. That's why they scattered quotes in the previous lecture. So I won't say much about it. I've just noticed that the central point in the direct reference framework is the non-descriptive nature of natural kind terms, from which their rigidity should follow, if you only could say what they rigidly refer to across quotes. So I totally admit that this is really a problem in Putnam and his theory of natural kind terms. But to recap, for Hanna, the essential lexical component of natural kind terms restricts them to the totality of matter found in any given possible word considered as the actual word. But in any such word, the extension of gold is all known to those bodies that possess the analyzable or decomposable phenomenological identifying features of gold, namely yellow, metal, heavy, high density, etc. So, we have two options here. So the first way of understanding what's going on is to say that gold refers in a word W to whatever is yellow, metal, heavy, rust resistance, etc. in the actual word. It can turn out that gold does not have such characteristics in W. Or we can say that gold refers in a word W to whatever is yellow, metal, heavy, rust resistance in W. Now, Hanna chooses the second option. That's what it means to say that gold refers to whatever has such and such features in a given word considered as actual. This choice corresponds to the first dimension necessity in a two-dimensional semantics. To take another example, water is a drinkable clear liquid is necessary in the first dimension, and water is H2O and water is XYZ are both first dimension possibilities. As Hanna notices, there is a close logical semantic similarity between Kant's notion of analyticity and the neo-Kripken's deep or a priori conceptual necessity according to primary intention. So the choice of B in this case corresponds to the fourth dimension necessity in two-dimensional semantics. So that's what we exploit now, this proximity. first intentional necessary sentence can be known a priori because it merely states a canonical description of a certain kind of stuff. In Hanna's terminology, it's microconceptual structure, with the tendent distinction between a complete or idealized description and what you can realistically expect people to grasp. The first dimension, so understood, is in accordance with one central aim, if not the central aim, of Hanna's thesis. The logical space, as delineated by what you grasp a priori, is larger than the space of laws of nature. And this is the root of our modal concepts. This is our deep modal concepts. It is the exploitation of the logical space at large. And there's David Chalmers explained in the first dimension, in a two-dimensional framework. Even if all words with different laws of nature are metaphysical and possible, it is still tremendously useful to have a wider space of logically possible words with different laws. Such extended understanding of logical space allows us to consider all sorts of rationally coherent possibilities involving different laws. And what Chalmers says is that what is true across such extended logical space is what is necessarily true in the first dimension. In the two-dimensional framework, the indexical component is needed to deal with indexical sentences, while non-indexical components are purely qualitative specifications of a scenario. So here is Chalmers. One can think of D intuitively as a description of W in a neutral qualitative terms, along with the specification of, in indexical terms, of the center's location in W. The center part of the center possible words is needed to handle indexical claims such as I am in Australia. Sentences such as gold is a yellow metal are not indexical claims, and therefore can be explained in purely qualitative terms. There are two important distinctions between Hanna's theory and the two-dimensional framework. The first crucial distinction, if you understand Hanna's proposal, is that you can never really think beyond the first dimension. So it's a kind of two-dimensional framework with only the first dimension. So it's a half two-dimensional framework. I'll be more interested in the second difference that concerns the role of indexicals. In Chalmers' first dimension, indexicals are needed to deal with indexical claims, such as I am in Australia, and not otherwise. And this seems reasonable. There doesn't seem to be room for indexicals in the qualitative description of kinds that delineates the space of racially coherent possibilities. So here's again Chalmers. For any possible word W, it is epistemically possible that W is actual, or at least it's epistemically possible that the word qualitatively identical to W is actual. However, epistemic possibilities are more fine-grained than possible words. For example, the information that actual word is qualitatively like a possible word W is epistemically consistent with different epistemic possible claims about one's self-location. For example, it's consistent with the claims that it's now 2004, 2004, it's now 2005. A concept such as gold has no indexical component in the first dimension of a two-dimensional theory. If Hanna's approach can be placed in this two-dimensional framework, even if he deems the second dimension to be an illusion, it's no wonder that we could not find a proper place for indexicals in the analysis of natural kind concepts. We could use again the strategy of saying that it's just another project. So again, two-dimensional framework is a different project from Hanna's idea. But this response is less convincing now. In both cases, the idea seems to be the identification of the rational roots of our modal concepts in what can be grasped a priori by a rational subject. And I think that for this reason, there is no room for indexicals in the account of the modal profile of natural kind terms. So in the very project of what I take to be the common project of Hanna and say David Chalmers' version of the two-dimensional semantics, it's natural not to find in place for indexical components natural kind concept. They don't belong there. Looking for indexicals. Let us recap the reasons for the uneasiness with indexicals in Hanna's proposal. The first reason, so the first reasons were they don't represent the perspective of the subject in a scene, unlike Perry's approach. They don't correspond to the prototypical use of demonstratives. Again, unlike Kaplan in his idea that the logic of demonstratives represents the semantic apparatus we can find in a language. They don't select samples. What seems to be needed to keep the reference across microperceptual changes, and more important, what seems to be the natural role of indexicals, that is selecting an object in a scene that will afterwards work as samples if you're talking about the natural kind concept. But there is a further, more important problem in Hanna's project. If I get him right, the role of the indexical component in natural kind concepts is that a given kind has in its extension in a word whatever has the characteristics that are part of its structure in this word. So here is our beloved concept of gold. It's yellow, metal, etc. So in W1, there is a substance which is yellow, metal, heavy, high density, malleable, and has the atomic number 79. Here in W2 there are two substances, yellow, metal, heavy, etc., and the atomic number 80. And then another substance which is white, metal, heavy, and is rigid, and has the atomic number 79. In W1, gold refers to the element whose atomic number is 79, while in W2 it refers to the element number 80. Gold refers in each word W to whatever has its phenomenological identifying features in W. The indexical element is responsible for this indexing, if I get Hanna right at this point. But this is already the way a general concept works. The set of yellow objects in W is the set of objects that have the phonological identifying feature of being yellow in W. And the sum of phonological identifying features will behave likewise. In other words, it's able to postulate indexicals in the structure of natural kind concepts. And this is the reason. That's the reason why in the first dimension indexicals are needed to deal with indexical claims such as in Australia, and not otherwise. Concepts such as gold are purely qualitative. Indexicals are useless in Hanna's theory, and that's why they are so atypical. They don't represent the perspective of an agent, they don't correspond to the prototypical use of demonstratives, and they don't select objects in a scene. But this is just not a demonstrative. My final suggestion is that the natural kind concepts in Hanna's framework are really not indexicals. The indexical component of such concepts doesn't add anything to the way that their descriptive components work. I think it would be better to assume a first dimension semantics and restrict the role of indexicals to legitimate indexical claims. That's it. Thank you.